Rosen, and I'm really excited this morning to have this webinar, Creating a More Inclusive Environment, featuring 2022 HR Department of the Year Award winner, Philaldephia Zoo, Vikram Dewan and Courtney Johnson. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, just welcoming everybody to our webinar this morning. Excited to have everyone. So I wanted to start out with some facts about the HR awards. I know many of you have either applied for an award, or if you've either applied or attended in the past. I'll give you some background. So I founded the program in 1998. So, and basically I had worked in corporate HR before I started my business. And so I had, I don't know, like I felt HR was always getting criticized or devalued. And so I thought, well, what better way to pay tribute to the HR community than having an awards program? And so that was the initiation of the program. So 24 years and counting, and it's still going strong. So we are underwritten or hosted by a number of sponsors. My business is the Rosen Group. We have David Pinette representing Challenger Gray and Christmas. We have John Toohey representing Salvis and Stetson Group. We have Malcolm Ingram representing Greenberg Trowig, and we have John Ford representing Marcia McClellan Agency and Tryon. We also have several sponsors who, without their sponsorships, we really probably wouldn't be able to run this program. So we're grateful for Kelly Benefit Strategies and Independence Blue Cross, and all of the other sponsors that have joined us this year. And we also want to thank our chapter sponsors, Tri-State HRMA, Philly SHRM, Chester County, and Delco SHRM. So again, we've had this program, and the way it works very simply is that we award several different awards, one for HR Department of the Year, and we do that by company size. And then we also have awards of excellence in several different categories, one of which you'll see is diversity. And that's really what the conversation today is going to focus on, is the zoo winning the award for diversity last year. And the event itself is November 16th. It's at 5:30. It's at the Crystal Tea Room in Philadelphia. Usually we get about 250 to 300 attendees. And it's like a who's who of the HR community. So if you haven't registered, it's a great event to go to if you've never been. And if you have, we'd love to have you back again. And it's hrawards.org. So I'm going to start out with introduction, and I'm going to introduce Courtney Johnson, and Courtney is going to then introduce Vik, and then we'll get our discussion started. So Courtney, who I've known for a while now, is Chief Administrative Officer and a key member of the executive leadership team at the Philadelphia Zoo. She has responsibility for strong strategic and tactical management throughout the organization, including directing the zoo's human resource strategies and risk management functions. So Courtney, you can introduce, or you and your cat can introduce Vik, and we'll get started.
Thank you, Scott, for having us today. Good afternoon, everyone. As Scott mentioned, I'm Courtney Johnson, Chief Administrative Officer for the Philadelphia Zoo. I apologize in advance that I am powering through a particularly tough cold, so I will do my best to project and ask for forgiveness if I need to go off camera to spare you from watching me blow my nose. But we're really grateful to be here today. And what you'll hear from Vik in just a second as well when he introduces himself is that we are not DE&I specialists or individuals who have trained in this space. We're really here to talk about the practical application of the way that we have worked through a process at Philadelphia Zoo. It has not been a straight line journey for us, and we hope that what we're able to share with you today will give you some insight into ways that you might be able to apply some of those same strategies. So thank you again. And before I hand off to Vik to introduce himself, I just wanted to also give a shout out to the HR Department of the Year process. We loved being part of the application process last year. I think for many of you, on the line today, especially if you're working in human resources, we tend not to celebrate our own accomplishments and really focus on those in other departments and teams. And so even just the process of filling out the application and reminding ourselves about everything that we had done up until that point related to our diversity work was really powerful. And sharing that application with the team after it was completed, even if we didn't win an award, was a really, really fantastic way to have recognition even internally. So I just wanted to say how easy that process was, including the interview process with the judging panel. And of course, we were thrilled to come home with a trophy, but that's not why we did it. So thank you again for including us as part of that process last year. All right, Vik, I will hand off to you.
All right, thanks so much. And good afternoon, everybody. And delighted to be here. And again, humbled and grateful to have received the award last year. And we're on a learning journey, though. So we're really looking forward to this conversation today and your questions. We're always learning in this space. We believe that it's great to get the recognition, but there's some wonderful opportunities that we can continue to grow and learn from. The other comment I would make before I sort of give you a little bit of my background is we do have animals at the zoo other than tigers. Just happen to be very partial to tigers. That's why both Courtney and I have that background here today, and we are safe. We're in a safe area. We're not going to get eaten up by those in our background. So I have been the president of the Philadelphia Zoo for 17 years now, and in a somewhat bittersweet fashion, I am stepping down as part of a planned succession process. We are looking forward very much to be welcoming my successor, Dr. Joelle Mogerman, who has been at the St. Louis Zoo and before that in Chicago, to come to Philadelphia and to the Philadelphia Zoo and to take over the role. I'm the 14th president of the Philadelphia Zoo, America's first zoo. It has been an incredibly wonderful 17-year journey being here, and delighted to have had this opportunity to lead this great organization. However, I did not come from the animal or the zoo world. My background before coming to the Philadelphia Zoo, as we sometimes say around here, was from the dark side. I came from the for-profit financial services world before joining the Philadelphia Zoo in 2006. In my time in the financial services world, for either what might be considered a positive or a negative for Courtney, I did have an opportunity to be the head of an HR function for a large corporation. While that was not my background either, I was true an international banker. I had a CEO who very much believed that HR embedded in the business, understanding how the organization operates, is what makes HR most effective. And I have been really, from that experience, I have become very much a believer in the way in which the partnership between the CEO and the HR function is a critically important relationship. As I said a little earlier, whether that's to Courtney's benefit or to her detriment, I am constantly there thinking about our people issues, our people strategies, always incredibly grateful for the work that our HR team does and the way in which they are core to the way we look at our mission and the way the core organization is operating, and its decisions, its core decisions around the things that we will do and the things that we'll invest in. And so bringing that background, as well as my banking background to the Philadelphia Zoo, 17 years ago was an incredible opportunity. And now stepping down and moving on, as I said, as part of a planned succession process. Scott, thank you for having us on. Thank you for the work that you and your group do, and really looking forward to this conversation today.
Thank you, Vik. Wow, that's great, and we're excited. I don't know what you're going to be doing in retirement. I'm sure it's not going to be sailing on a boat or playing golf all the time. So I'm sure you have lots of things to do. Just an aside, I happened to be at the Phillies game last night. I saw a real nice. This cat, I think, was out there in left field somewhere. So that's nice that you're getting some exposure. And okay, so just start off with some questions really about the zoo itself, and then we'll dig down to HR, DEI. Yeah, just maybe if you can just one of you or both of you just give a little bit of structural background about the zoo. I know you said it's America's first zoo. Maybe a short intro to the zoo's history, but also like how is the company structured? Is it a flat organization? How do you break, who reports to who, just in general? And either one of you can take that question.
Well, I'm seeing Courtney on mute, so that's my signal that the question got punted to me. So it's incredible in Zoom what we've learned, the said and the unsaids. Yes, we're America's first zoo. We were founded in 1859. We actually opened for operations after the Civil War in 1874. And we are an independent, nonprofit organization. And even though we have Philadelphia in our first name, we're not owned by the city of Philadelphia. And in fact, we receive little to no financial support from the city of Philadelphia, but we have a very, very important relationship with the city, as you would imagine, from that perspective. We receive approximately a little over 1 million visitors a year. And importantly, within that 1 million visitors a year are two important facts. One is approximately 120 to 150,000 of those million are school kids. They don't all come on the same day, although when people drive by our location and see these lines of school buses, they think that all 150,000 arrived on the same day. That's in fact not the case. So we have a very, very important role in terms of the outreach into the school and education community. But second, and perhaps more germane to our conversation today, we have significantly the most diverse visitor base of any institution in Philadelphia. We are embedded in the neighborhoods of West Philadelphia. We see ourselves very much part of the ecosystem of West Philadelphia. And at the same time, we serve a much bigger community as well, not just the immediate neighborhoods around the zoo. We have anywhere, depending on sort of how you count it and measure it, between 1,300 or 1,900 animals if you count every single naked mole rat and every single individual animal. But if we look at it more comprehensively, about 1,300 animals. We have about 190, 185, 190 full-time year-round staff. And then we balloon out during certain times of the year with other seasonal and other individuals that join the full-time staff. We have a very active group of volunteers that are core to our operations. And I'll come back to the structure in just a second, Scott. And we have a very engaged, highly effective, and we believe one of the best boards in Philadelphia. They're really high performing. They're very much focused on good governance. And have been at the heart of much of the creativity and growth that the organization has gone through over the course of the last couple of years. When I introduced myself, I gave you a little bit of the background on the financial background. That was an unusual decision by the board to hire a former banker, but it was part of their thinking around the notion that the organization had a very, very strong ethos around animal well-being and animal care. And what we needed was a more structured approach to long-term financial resilience. That as a nonprofit, financial resilience and having the financial resources to be able to operate was a key element of it. And so our organizational structure in many ways reflects our mission components, and generating revenue and being strong financially is also part of our mission. It's not in opposition to that. And we believe that being able to operate responsibly and be able to carry out our outreach into the community, our education programs, our conservation programs, both locally and around the world, our commitment to sustainability, the way in which we engage with our visitors, having habitat areas here for our animals that start with thinking about the highest level of animal care and animal well-being is really core to how we think about ourselves. And our structure reflects that, since that is an expression of our strategy as an organization. Let me pause there and ask Courtney to jump in and add whatever I may have missed.
It's impossible to add anything there. So I think for everybody who's listening, it's clear why I stayed on mute. This is, just to drill down one additional layer, I can just give you a quick overview of the HR department specifically. As Vik mentioned, we align our talent strategy and the way that we comprehensively look at the departments and their organizational structure to support all of those different aspects of the work that we do. And within the HR team, we have a director of human resources. We have 2 HR generalists. We also have a talent acquisition specialist, an HR coordinator, as well as an HR administrative support. So it's a team that's there to support, again, the combination of our full-time staff, the seasonal staff that Vik mentioned that are additional to the organization during peak seasons and different times of year. And then, of course, also provide support to the groups that are managing volunteers as well.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you both for that answer. So I'm going to start digging down a little bit more into HR and the DEI initiative. But first, I want to ask a question about the working relationship between the two of you, and I'll ask both of you to answer the question. And I know, Vik, that you already gave a statement about how valuable HR is. Maybe just a sub question under your working relationship is: did you always value HR the way you do now, or did that evolve over time, or how did that happen?
Good question, Scott. I have always valued the HR relationship. I have, again, if we go back to that period of approximately 4 years where I headed up the HR organization for a major corporation, I had always felt that it was so critically important that the HR function be at the table around issues that extend beyond what we traditionally think about in terms of the administration side of HR, compensation, benefits, employee relations issues, labor relations, those kinds of things. But that HR has to be core and central to the setting of strategy around the organization's direction, and be at the table around the input process around how we're perceived externally, critically important as we think about the hiring process and the like, how we are positioned internally around culture and the way we think about culture and the culture that we're trying to create within the organization. And very importantly, that the HR function needs to really be well informed around how and what way the different business units within the organization actually operate. And so again, to Courtney's detriment, I'm constantly in her office, walking up to her, asking her for, let's talk about this. What about this other issue? And I would say in more than 2/3 of the cases, they're not specifically related to the HR function, but there's something that have more broadly to do with the direction of the organization. And so it is a very, very important working relationship, and it extends beyond sort of what one would think about from that perspective. And it also includes how we think about not just our mission areas, our outreach into neighborhoods, and the work that we're doing in animal care and the like, but it also extends into how we work with our board, because our board ultimately sets the direction and strategy for the organization. And if they do that devoid of an understanding of sort of culture and the people components, I feel like it lacks the context on being able to be effectively and appropriately delivered and done with buy-in and approach on that. So And now you'll hear from Courtney whether everything I said actually reflects on the other side or not. So.
No, absolutely it does. I was actually kind of hoping that you would ask us to hold up a sticky note that scores our relationship and see how close or how far away we were. But no, everything that Vik said, obviously 100% true. I have recognized for many, many years how fortunate I have been throughout my time working at Philadelphia Zoo to have that level of partnership and sophistication of a relationship with the CEO. Because as Vik mentioned, all of these pieces really do connect into one another. And I really do firmly believe that the best human resources business partners are really business partners. They understand the organization. They're expected to understand the organization in order to help create the right solutions. Vik and I talk a lot frequently when we're faced with different challenges and complex problems that we're trying to solve. We think about both the individual impact that whatever that situation is having, the group impact, and then the systems level impact for the organization. And so I think that the best part of our relationship is being able to take some really gnarly topics, some really, really challenging things, and find a way to productively deconstruct those topics or those conversations and then bring us to a better place. So I think it's been exactly as Vik has described it. Wonderful that he brought that background, although I've at times said I really want to see the resume and the line by line of all that time spent in HR, but it has been an incredible opportunity for me to have a CEO that understood that from the beginning.
Great, thank you both. So I can tell intuitively that you get along very well and that you probably are on the same page most of the time. However, there are probably times where, one of you sees things a certain way and the other one sees them a different way. Any examples or thoughts about that? And is it agree to disagree, or, how do you guys resolve those kinds of situations?
I'm happy to go on that one first, and then I'll see, Vik, if you have anything to add to it. I think that part of that exceptional level of trust that we have with one another is that we always know that each one of us are coming to the conversation with the belief that whatever our position is on an issue is in the best interest of the organization. And there's never any question about agenda or politicking or anything on that front whatsoever. And so we can have dramatically different points of views and essentially reach an impasse in the conversation. But each of us, I think, have learned the value of continuing to turn over that other perspective in our head, whether that's over a couple of hours or a couple of days before we come back together and say, I've been giving that more thought, and here's where I think, we might want to take this next. And more often than not, I think both of our positions are honored in some way, and that we reach the best solution for the organization. We are not I told you so, or I was right, or that was my idea kind of culture. So I think that the solutions that we create always feel like they're in partnership.
So that sounds like a healthy marriage, if we drove it down to a personal level. Vik, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I was going to add is it oftentimes depends on the topic or the issue. And I do tend to be someone that, although I do drill down on specific topics and specific issues, I don't go very much into the kind of micro detail on every single thing that's happening at the zoo. One of our board members describes our organization as perhaps the most complex organization he has ever seen. And when you think about, the risk issues of 1 million visitors, 1,300 animals, many of whom would be happy to eat you and eat your visitors, and all the risks that are associated in there. There are a lot of things that we deal with, and as a result of which, there is a significant amount of delegation and empowerment that I have come to operate with and to operationalize, not just with the HR function, but with many other parts around the organization. And so it does depend a lot on the topic. And there are cases where we do significantly disagree. And where we have, Courtney and I do bring it back with, okay, let's break that down and look at it a little more carefully and see sort of where we are. but there are so many more cases where we've actually could end each other's sentence with, like, I'm thinking it this way, and then Courtney says, and then she finishes off the sentence. And that actually tends to be more the norm than the disagreements situations.
Thank you. And that's really helpful to hear. And as you probably both guess, not every CEO, HR leader relationship sounds as you know healthy and productive as yours. And so we have a group of HR folks, mostly HR folks, on this webinar. And again, I'm sure some of you out there have great relationships with your boss, and I'm probably guessing there are some that are challenged in a different way. So it's really good to see examples of the kind of relationship that you guys are describing. We did get one shout out, just congratulating you both on your efforts in diversity and HR overall. And I would encourage people, this is a great opportunity to ask a question of either Vik or Courtney about their organization or anything that you wanted to talk about. And all you need to do is put your question in the chat or Q&A, or I think you can raise your hand. So we'd love to see some questions from the audience. So the next, I guess we'll start kind of breaking into diversity a little bit more in depth. And so I guess my first question is, did you both come from environments in the your previous careers where diversity was, top of the list, the most important thing for the organization? And we all know, right, that some companies will say, people are our most important asset, and diversity is really important to us, but not necessarily walking the talk, which it sounds like you guys do. So just a little bit from either one or both of you about your history with diversity programs.
Vik, I'll let you go first. That's a good one for you.
So Scott, I've had an interesting journey personally on that front. And so the organization that I started with on the banking side advanced a very significant commitment to diversity and inclusion in the 90s. And we all can recognize that the way in which the issues around diversity and inclusion were highlighted and the training that occurred around that in the 90s was different than it is today. But it was a very important part of my background, and it was particularly in place and highlighted when I was heading up the HR department. So it became a really significant part of my own personal set of leadership responsibilities at that time. And so I came through that with a very clear, deeper understanding around the issues around diversity and inclusion. And as a man of color, it became increasingly clear to me in an organization and in an industry that was largely dominated by white males, and in the environment in which we were working in, how important that was. And it raised my own personal level of understanding around that. But the training also gave me a broader group level and systems level understanding around the dimensions of diversity and the importance of that. And then in the organization that I was in, we got acquired by another organization that didn't have the same commitment. And so it was a very interesting way in which to sort of test your own personal belief systems around the work that we had done and the training that we had received. And in many ways, while that was not the issue that ultimately led me to leaving the financial services world, it was deeper than that. It was broader than that, that ultimately, sort of one day you wake up and say, like, well, what exactly is going to be my obituary? What is exactly going to be my contribution to this world and this planet? And am I satisfied with sort of what I have done? And that's a moment where you go, like, no, it's time to make a change and it's time to do that. And I was incredibly fortunate to then join the zoo. So I came with an understanding around that, but that became even clearer and deeper, as we'll discuss in a few minutes, in the journey that we took here, because the journey we took here was not a straight line. And I think that it's instructive to sort of walk through how and what way that occurred as well.
Great. Thank you, Vik. Courtney, would you like to comment on that for your own past and career path?
Yes, I mean, I think that, prior to coming to Philadelphia Zoo, I worked for Target in the Philadelphia region. And one of the things that was really core to the ethos of that company, and specifically working and opening stores in this area, was making sure that you were creating job opportunities for people who live locally. And there was work that was certainly being done at the time to think about what the broader, again, sort of systems level view of DE&I was for the company. But I think that more often than not, it was really about the lessons learned and the interactions that we had with the people who were parts of the teams that were at the store level in those particular communities, and looking at the ways in which the diversity of the staff was represented in every particular facet of what it means to have a diverse group of employees, and how to create the right consistent culture and team expectations while still honoring all of those differences. And so that was really, for me, when I had the opportunity to come and work at Philadelphia Zoo, was really a big part of it for me, was continuing to have a lot of the same ingredients that were present working in that environment for Target, also available, at Philadelphia Zoo, including, the public-facing environment, the wide range of roles and responsibilities that were captured under the umbrella of what it takes to run Philadelphia Zoo, everything from, senior level veterinarians and researchers, straight, down the line to our seasonal staff and our volunteers that Vik mentioned. So all of that was really part of the foundation that I brought into this work.
Great. Thank you, Courtney. So we do have some questions that we'll have posed to you. I just wanted to mention that the shout out came from Jody Dickinson. So thank you, Jody, and glad you're here. And so the first question is from Clayton Platt, and it says, do you see the diversity of the animals represented at the zoo as a model for how you manage the human population?
So Clayton, thank you for that question. I think that we've learned that there are a lot of learnings and symmetry between what we see in our world and what we see in nature. And in so many cases, as we look at the issues around biodiversity, as we look at the issues around the health of our planet and the importance of maintaining biodiversity as part of the health of the planet, we are very much committed to what we believe is healthy populations of diverse animals around the world. That said, what is in our human community is different and more complicated than that. And at a surface level and at a high level, animals that have diverse settings is an important part of their enrichment and their ability to have full and fulfilling lives. That narrative and that understanding definitely carries over. And internally, when we talk about the importance of diversity, we also talk about it in the context of the diversity of our animal species, the genetic backgrounds, the importance of all of that's something that strengthens it. And the like. Inbreeding causes all kinds of problems within animals, as we see in the pet trade and we see in other cases. And so that communication can carry through definitely in our internal communications.
Great, thanks. Courtney, would you like to add anything to that?
No, I mean, I think that Vik's, really hit on that. And I think that, anytime you have a mission-based organization that brings such a wide variety of individuals, again, into a public-facing environment, as Vik mentioned, I think that you have to regularly be evaluating what that experience is, the way that the visitors are looking at that, and then additionally, again, where your staff and volunteer culture intersects with that process as well. I do think it would be useful, and I'm going to pitch to Vik on this because, again, I think it speaks a little bit more to some of the questions that I'm seeing that are popping up here about the road that we have been on and some of those stop-off points, and we'll kind of pass that back and forth a little bit. to share with you some of the things that we'll just say were maybe even punctuation points for us along the journey, and the way that we've built out our programs to be able to support some of the ideas and the concepts that we're talking about. So Vik, if you just wanted to talk a little bit first, I can jump in as needed.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's important that we start from the place that our diversity journey did not begin with the murder of George Floyd. It began well before that. And in many ways, as an institution that recognizes that at its core, our audience base, our visitor base, those that we serve represent every zip code, every area, every ethnic background. And in many ways, the zoo for a first generation immigrant community is a very comfortable place to get assimilated into our culture here in the United States. They likely have a zoo in their home country. They understand the pieces around what it is that we're doing here. And so recognizing the diversity of our base of visitors and our business model, which is very dependent on creating an experiential opportunity that is engaging, that is relevant, that is important for the visitors that come here, that always put us in a place of believing that that was core to what we needed to do. And so our training programs and the like that we had already started well before 2020. But we did have a very specific situation that became an inflection point for us that occurred in the summer of 2018. And I think what it did, and the details, are not relevant. What is relevant is that it was a very difficult and complex situation that ultimately led to our staff calling the Philadelphia Police Department on a group of youth from the neighborhood. And that experience was captured on video and went viral. And in the space of within less than 5 hours, there had been more than 20 million views, very specifically pointing out something that we had done that may have been done with all the right thought, but it represented a lack of understanding of how complex the relationship can be with law enforcement and young African-American males and that situation coming together. And it immediately led to a call for a conversation around de-escalation training and doing that as opposed to engagement training, trying to understand much more deeply who we are to the neighborhoods around the zoo. And that took us down a very, very different path, starting down in 2018 and then leading forward from there. So let me turn it back to you, Courtney, to fill in a little bit both the internal and the external consequences of that, and then what it led to and how we began to measure our work and how we've been moving from there.
So what I would say just about the specific instant, response and what happens in those moments, and I hope that no one else, who's with us today is in a position where they need to respond to something quite so visible and really, really challenging. What's typical for most companies and organizations to do is to spend, at least the first 24 hours or so just trying to get the facts straight. What exactly happened? What didn't happen? Did we do the right thing? Did we do the wrong thing? And I think that one of the things that was extremely valuable for us was very shortly after working our way through the what's of what happened, it really became clear that it almost did not matter on a level. It didn't matter who did what and what the sequence of things were. It just mattered that it did happen and that Philadelphia Zoo was a part of what had occurred. And so it was a much more emotional conversation than it was a factual one. And that was a really important position for us to take externally, but it was equally important for us to take that position and communicate that internally to our staff and to our volunteers who were watching, the videos and who were looking to us to have a position and a stance on what had occurred. And as Vik mentioned, while the first initial part of the conversation was how do we bring in the right partners to help us look at de-escalation training, that really quickly turned a corner into a much broader discussion and evaluation of what are the things that are going on in the organization at an operational level that are inadvertently influencing or creating an outcome like this. Something had failed, and we needed to figure out exactly how to make sure that everyone in the organization understood the importance of looking at the decisions that we make, the policies we put in place, and the way that we interact with the public specifically through the lens of being an inclusive place. And so that really brought us to a place of making sure that we had created a wonderful partnership with an external consultant. Because again, if you are not skilled in this space, if it is not your expertise, there's a reason why you bring in those people to work with you. And I encourage you to do all the research in the world to find the best partner for your company, because that partnership matters critically. And so that individual came in and helped us really sort of peel back the layers and have some really quite uncomfortable conversations up front before then building a program that would then play out over multiple years as we looked at how we interact with the public, how we interact with one another, what the applications were to our internal policies and procedures, and a number of other different platforms. And so at the moment of the murder of George Floyd, when so many companies and organizations, rightfully so, were reeling and trying to figure out exactly how to respond and what to say, we felt that we were grateful, to be honest with you, really grateful that we'd done some very hard lifting before that point, because we had some common vocabulary and we had a relationship with our organization and our community at a point where we felt like our voice was really important. So that was really for us a huge, again, moment where, again, the work took another sort of, lift in terms of its trajectory. But that was a really big moment for us.
Great. Thank you, guys. That's amazing, information about how you guys handle things in a tough situation. So I was going through the questions. There's about eight questions out there, but rather than, I tried to distill them, my extremely analytical mind, not that the questions revolved around implementation of the strategy and actually what is the strategy? Like, what does it consist of? How do you do it? Second was the business case. Is there a business case? Does it matter if there's a business case? And then the third was metrics. How do you measure results? Sorry, I'm throwing all those questions out,
That's okay.
But I had to do it before I forgot. So
I'll start with a little bit of what the what the strategy is, and then the programs that we put in place to be able to to implement that strategy. So I mean, at a very basic and high level, of course, our goal is to be an inclusive environment that stretches again across our board of directors, our staff, our volunteers, and then particularly for our guests. We don't think that it's enough, as Vik stated at the beginning, that we're fortunate to welcome such a diverse audience. It's critical that when our audience comes to the zoo, they feel that they belong in that space and that they see themselves reflected in our staff and in our volunteers. So of course, there's components of strategy that relate to talent acquisition, which I know most organizations have, and we're certainly no different in that space. We are very, very firmly invested in ongoing and regular learning. This work is absolutely never done. And just when you think that there's the correct set of letters, there's another letter that might be added on. It's really important. You need to get your arms around that really quickly. And so making sure that we have set up regular and routine learning environments for our staff that stretch across the structured ones with our outside consultant, as well as just tapping into the things that are already out there and creating environments for people to tap into webinars and discussions together at the same time, and then having some discussions afterward to hear what the feedback was and the application for our environment is really important. We also felt it was very critical that we activated a staff council. That was one thing that had been absent prior to 2020, and we felt that that was something that certainly really brought that forward that we needed to move forward with. And when that group got together, one of the things that it expressed a strong interest in was making sure that we were posting information either on our intranet site or sharing information over all staff email about different things that were going on a month-to-month basis that were important in terms of highlighting the diversity of our guests and or our staff and volunteers. And that's a pretty big assignment for those of you that have written and crafted those messages, the careful, language that we use, the research we do. And so we decided that it was a really great opportunity to activate the members of the council themselves. So we said, I think this is a great idea, and who wants to sign up? And so that process of actually activating the council and having them do some of that work themselves was extremely helpful. And we stated from the beginning that we knew that the moment we started sharing a diversity calendar and putting some of those pieces out there, we were likely to stumble. There was going to be something that we put in writing, despite best scrubbing and research and everything else, that didn't land well. And we stated up front that we wanted the council to understand that if we were hearing feedback, even if it was negative feedback or constructive feedback, that was not a sign of failure. That was definitely a sign of engagement, and that we were on a process and a journey that would lead us to the next place. So we've been working through that process over the last year. As predicted, we've had moments that landed well and moments that didn't. That has not cut us off. We've not stopped the program. We've just continued to evolve and learn from that, and understand the value of simply saying, thank you for the feedback. We apologize if something didn't land well, and we'll get it right the next time. So that's been a really important part. And then the other piece I would add is that we've done quite a bit of work at the board of directors level as well. Embedding DE&I components into the governance process, as well as the governance, policies, procedures, and documents, and also going through an extensive learning program with an outside consultant as well, and the board of directors. So we have multiple places where we're, tracking towards our own personal goals, and then being members of the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, we also have standards that we are accountable for as part of our accreditation, which occurs on a regular basis for institutions.
And Courtney,
Thank
let me
you.
pick up. Yep, Scott, let me pick up from there to address the other two questions around the business case and the metrics.
Yep.
And so on the business case, I think we are, as an organization, incredibly fortunate to reflect the Philadelphia that we're a part of. And there are many other nonprofits who are not, where their core audience base is not fully reflective of the Philadelphia that they are in, even if Philadelphia is part of their first name. We are. And one of the important business principles that we have here at the Philadelphia Zoo is to really try as best as possible to cover as much of our operating expense line from earned revenue, which means we have to be not only engaging and important and relevant from a mission perspective, but we also have to have people participate either with their wallets or through their philanthropy in order to be able to support the Philadelphia Zoo. And so there is a really important business case for why it is incredibly important that we undertake this work, because the core audiences we serve, not just in person, but also online and around the world, is a much more diverse audience base than one would have expected. And the trend lines are towards more diversity, not less. And so to us, it's a critical part of what we want to be working on. In terms of metrics, I would say that Courtney would tell you I'm a very much a metrics-bound person. Dashboards, measure. You can't really kind of control or drive if you don't know what you're measuring and all of that. In this particular work, I think it's really important that you are clear about what it is that you're measuring and why you've put that metric in place. A simple metric may not measure the right answer. And let me give you a quick example on that and sort of how we've looked at it. So one of the issues that we have really wrestled with is that while we have a diverse employee base, in certain departments, that is not the case. And importantly, in our animal department, which is the department that most people pay attention to when they think about the zoo, and when a young person comes to the zoo and thinks about I want to see myself in that person, what they will generally see is a white woman. That is about 85% of our employee base in the animal department. And you could ask yourself, like, why is that the case? Why is that happening? Could be a lot of reasons for that. But one of the issues that became clear to us as we looked at that and said, we need a more diverse base of employees in every department, not just in these areas, but also in the animal department. What we determined was we had a systemic base issue and challenge there, which is that every time we had an opening in the animal department, we would get hundreds of resumes for every position. People will tell you every day that being a keeper at the Philadelphia Zoo, super cool job, love to have it. And we would see lots and lots of resumes, and it became easy for our hiring managers to pick those individuals that had the longest list of internships. And most of those internships were unpaid internships. And so an economic barrier had been created over, again, it doesn't matter if it was conscious or unconscious, the impact of that was that we weren't hiring from a much more diverse pool because there had been a systemic barrier that had been created. And so when you embark on a metric that says, I want to hire more people of color into that important area, it became important that we address that goal in a systemic way. And so what we've embarked on is actually a 7-year program to starting with 10th grade and high school, hiring 25 sophomores from high school in the areas immediately around the zoo, and hope that as many of them make it through the 7-year period, including college. And at the end of that 7-year period, as part of our West Philly Scholars Program, we'll have paid internships, scholarships, and partnerships that ultimately will make sure that those that we bring in will be not only in a place that have mentors and then be successful here, but that really speaks to that goal. The alternative might have been simply to say, go out and hire more people of color, which we will do. But the systemic approach is the one that we are also investing in to make sure that we're addressing that metric in a comprehensive way, not just in a tactical way.
Great. Thank you both. So we're beginning our wind down process here. I want to make sure everybody, we get out on time. So I think the last couple questions are surrounding advice, which is, worth a lot or not. In terms of, to other HR professionals or CEOs, hey, we've got a diversity program, but it's not really gaining much traction, or, what are some best practices if you were advising, HR leader, CEO, somebody who's getting it off the ground and says, we're going to do this, where would you start? I guess. Where would you start?
I mean, I think that this is one of those areas where it's most successful when it's not a top-down initiative. I really feel like if you're really starting from square one, or you're not sure whether or not the programs or the structure that you have in place is the right one, find the right set of staff, volunteers, whoever you have that you can put together and have a roundtable discussion or do an anonymous survey. I know that sounds extremely basic in its solution, but it's really powerful to hear from people about what their interests are and then where you're either hitting the mark or you're not. I've referenced it a couple of times throughout this conversation. You have to have the courage to be really uncomfortable and to make mistakes. And if you're constantly living in that place of fear, did I say the right thing or not the right thing? Did we do the right thing or not the right thing? You will really hamstring yourself and not take action. And so I think that sometimes just the forward momentum is really, really critical, and having that consistency where it's not something that pops up once a year. You find the right way to make sure that you're peppering conversations and discussions around this topic regularly. The other thing I'll just comment on that came from part of our process was that several years, even again before 2020, we had worked through a process of rewriting the zoo's core values. And in doing so, we had embedded a piece around diversity into a different core value that was around teamwork. It had some other additional comment associated with it. And when we put the draft core values out to the organization, it was the number one piece of feedback that we had from people, which is, I see and I understand why you did it that way. I don't think that's sufficient, and you need to have it be a standalone commitment and value to the organization. And so when you give people an opportunity to engage in that, and you're not worried about printing it on the coffee mug tomorrow, I think that's also a really powerful process, because it hopefully brings you to a better conclusion.
Thanks, Courtney. Vik, would you like to comment?
Yes, please. I mean, I would say that many organizations and individuals I've talked to, as they've talked to us about our diversity journey, have said, do you have a chief diversity officer? And I have said consistently that I believe that the CEO is the chief diversity officer. I believe at the end of the day, the commitment of the CEO to the way in which we look at the issues around diversity is not only core to how we define ourselves as an organization, but the CEO is not the only person that helps shape culture, but it certainly can be an individual who can unshape the culture, who can take it off track. And so in many ways, being that individual who identifies to the organization the commitment at the highest level, and then to being vulnerable enough, which for many CEOs is tough, because you're in a place where you got to be always right and always on and all of those things, to be at the place where you're always open to the learning part of it and being able to incorporate that learning in, and to also challenge back. So challenge back the people who develop your branding identity. Challenge back to your board and the way in which things have happened and the way that they have executed things. Challenge back when specific issues with certain communities hadn't been dealt with properly, and the feedback had come back in terms of how you had dealt with it. Take it with humility, but address it forthrightly and openly from that perspective. And I think how the CEO approaches the issues around diversity is incredibly important, because actions speak louder than words, much louder from that perspective.
Great. Thank you both. So as we kind of finish up here, you've gotten a lot of shout outs and congratulations. So kudos to you. And yeah, we're so happy that you participated in the program. We'd love to have you back on, other issues besides diversity, which I'm sure you're doing an excellent job in the HR area. And yeah, it was just really a terrific conversation. So we have recorded this meeting. I hope with your blessing, we'd like to get it out to the HR community so they can enjoy and learn from your comments. And yeah, you can send us all free zoo passes if you want. We're not no, just kidding. So yeah, thank you both. And I wish you well, Vik, with your future, and Courtney, continued success to you. So just to conclude, we have an awards event on November 16th, again at the Crystal Tea Room, 5:30, 9:30, hrawards.org. We'd love to see you in attendance. And thank you again to both of you.
Thank you so much for having us. Thank you, everybody, for your questions.
Have a great day.